High above the little town of Hall and the ag land surrounding it, the old grain elevator stands about 60 feet high. But that's eyeballing it. Nobody's actually measured it, at least in recent years.
We are probably one of the most photographed elevators around.
Judy Hogan and her husband Tom own the elevator. They run Hogan's Ranch and Builder Supply across the street. Their elevator isn't in operation anymore. They use it to store feed, seed, fertilizer, salt, and other farm and ranch necessities.
It all melds together. It all blends in together. The feed from the elevator and the hardware.
This isn't major grain growing country, but most farmers and ranchers grow or grew at least some grain, many to feed their own livestock.
There was grain, but wasn't a mainstay.
Judy's son Kevin Hogan says there isn't enough grain grown in the area to need an elevator anymore. He says many farmers who do might have their own bins to store it in. This is an old-fashioned wooden crib-style elevator.
Crib-style elevators were the standard up into the 60s, and they went into concrete. You just went with these boards, you just went around and around as you went all the way up each bin and hammered a lot of nails in these.
It was originally built as a Cargill elevator in 1912.
And a young man by the name of F.M. Fisher came out here as a grain buyer for Cargill. And then he stayed and his son took over.
Judy tells the story of that son, Bob, talking about the job his dad gave he and his brother.
F.M. Fisher would put Bob and Vince, one of his brothers, out on the top of the elevator on ropes. And then those kids would have to go around with hammers and pound in all the loose nails. Can you imagine?
The Fishers ran the grain elevator and a lumber yard here for 64 years. In later years, it became a PV feed dealer. The Hogans purchased the business in 1979 and expanded it to include just about everything.
Plumbing, hardware, lumber, feed and fertilizer and seed.
Kevin and his brothers grew up working in the business. They worked and played in the elevator.
We crawled all over everything and through the bins and up on top.
Kevin knows every nook and cranny.
Grain flowed down, buckets picked it up as they went up.
Here's the scale where the grain was weighed.
And it weighed by the bushel. This was the bushel counter.
The grain would have been deposited into bins. You would move this wheel to determine which bin.
And they usually had them numbered for what was in it, barley or oats or wheat.
In harvest season especially, tons and tons of grain were shoveled by hand. Everything was physical labor. It would have been hard work. Notice the skinny steps leading to the head house at the top of the elevator. Nobody here would have been overweight. Grain was shipped by rail. Trains don't come through here anymore, but you can still see the tracks. In the early days, farmers would have used horses to haul grain to and from town.
You'd have been in your horse and buggy with a ton of grain in it, probably at most, and you would have weighed, unloaded, pulled through, and pulled on out.
Trucks and pickups took over from horses.
And you would have pulled your truck underneath the load-out chute here, told them what grain you wanted and how much you wanted. They would have weighed it out.
Today, Kevin and his dad own the grain elevator at Hogan's Ranch Ag Supply in Deer Lodge. The Deer Lodge elevator is even bigger and taller than the one in Hall.
They're kind of sisters to each other.
The Deer Lodge elevator was built in 1913. Kevin stores grain to grind for sale here. He grinds grain about once a week.
We grind a little bit of our own feed. Most of it anymore is pre-made, pre-bought, but we do a little bit of grinding still for some people.
He marvels at how detailed, how beautiful these old grain elevators are.
Yes, they are a work of art.
It's a sense of stability, sense of the past, and part of the future.
The old original Cargill elevator in Hall, says Judy, is here to stay. It's part of history, she says. It's part of the valley. Kevin Mackey, NBC, Montana.